Hello, everyone. Though we are continuing with those lessons on Asian theological resources on conflict and reconciliation. We've had a look on biblical resources on that topic, and last time we had a first understanding of what we mean by Asian theologies. And we saw that the concept of harmony was central in different Asian theologians sourced, but that this concept was certainly more complicated than it looks and more disputed, and that especially theologians belonging to minorities, ethnic minority, or women theologians were questioning whether this concept of harmony was really helping us to enter into the realities of Asia. So today we are indeed going to investigate the concept of harmony as a specific Asian way of dealing with conflict and reconciliation. And we will start, I would say, by its most traditional expression. And it is in the course of those lessons that slowly we will be enriching and sometimes criticizing the concept of harmony, in China. Okay, so we do know that not only in China, actually in Korea, in Vietnam, in Japan, but also in other contexts, because the concept has become quite famous, the Chinese ideal of He has been very much popular and spoken about. The positions on this Chinese tradition cover a large array, from an indiscriminate reference to it to a very critical appraisal. Let's start by some extremely positive appraisal of the concept of harmony. Actually, Korean theologians have been the ones who have been most enthusiastic about the way Chinese ancient thought was helping Christian theologians to think again in an Asian context. For instance, the late Korean American theologian Jong-Young Lee has used the Chinese notion of harmony through the philosophical construct of yin-yang as a both and rather than an either-or worldview to meditate on the mystery of the Trinity. You know, we don't have to understand the relationship between persons, for instance, as either or, but as a both and, which is good for understanding how within the Trinity, God can be at the same time one and three. So I will don't develop this aspect, but it shows that even the most philosophical aspect of Chinese thought have been used for theological investigation. Actually, it's another Korean theologian, a Protestant, Hyung Kim, who has even proposed to go from harmony, to Tao, way of life, and to substitute the term of Tao to the one of Logos. So he sees Tao as a praxis, as a way of living with others, of living with the universe, in harmony. So he says that Tao is a kind of root metaphor. And he suggests that in Asia, we shouldn't speak of theologos, of discourse on the Tao, but on theodao, on a praxis of God, which is rooted in harmony. Both the logos and the praxis metaphor underscore only one dimension of knowing and acting. Tao is actually both discourse and praxis put together. Tao entails the unity of knowing and acting, the unity of knowing God and acting according to the will of God, as was propounded by Wang Yangming. So the unity of knowing and acting is a kind of harmony within oneself. I do not separate between what I do and what I know, and harmony between God and humankind. Though its resonance has been widespread, the term of harmony still doesn't suffice to capture the diversity and nuances of Asian theology. For instance, one speaks sometimes of homeland theologies, theology rooted into a soil, that show some diffidence toward traditional cultural concepts, which might tame or even deny local or marginal sensitivity. Somehow harmony is too big a concept, and somehow it breaks or it oppresses, I would say, local differences and sensitivity. Or in the Chinese concept, the school that call itself Sino-Christian theology certainly doesn't deny the importance of harmony, but it starts from a totally different premise. Its impetus has to do with elaborating a multifaceted theological discourse, which is anchored into the experience and, what is most important, the mother tongue proper to individual subject. Though the stress is on the individual, while when we speak about harmony, we speak very quickly, of course, about community. Harmony between individuals makes harmony sometimes more important than individuals. So once again, harmony is a very present and very potent concept, but as we saw already last time, it might leave some schools uneasy. Some other scholars actually somehow are suspicious of the political uses of the discourse on harmony, on the way harmony can oppress individuals, though they don't wish to erase immediately notions like individuality or modernity. They don't wish to see those concepts of individuality or modernity only as Western concept. There might be, after all, an Asian individual or Asian modernity. Well, a more radical criticism has come from the ones who are called Dalit theologians. The Dalit refers first to India, and Dalit is a self-chosen name of caste that the dominant system considers untouchable. Well, those theologians are not directly opposed to inculturation or acculturation per se, but they say that there is a structural sin underlying lies over or under dominant cultural category, and especially the one of harmony. That's somehow, speaking too quickly of harmony, can be oppressive for the minorities that live under a system that claims itself harmonious. Still, today I will not concentrate on those criticisms. We will meet with them later on our course. I will rather study the classical concept of harmony as developed by Chinese thinkers, because once again it has been very influential in what I would call mainstream Asio-theology. And I will study this classical Chinese concept of harmony as an independent cultural resource, the way we entered into biblical hermeneutic during our first lesson. Though the concept of harmony can be found in Chinese Jing, in Chinese classics. When you speak of Jing, you speak of a texture, actually, tissue, something, for instance, made of seed, which is exactly the same meaning as the Latin textus, text. Text and texture belong to the same vocabulary. It means that classics are made of notions that are interrelated, the way you create a clause somehow. So a classic is a text that develop basic notions and, for instance, the one of harmony. So we will find this concept of harmony related to other notions in the Shujing, in the Shejing, and many, many other classics, which I have listed on this slide. And somehow we are going to go from one important classic to another in order to enrich our approach of what He in Chinese might be. But I will not start with those classics, but by the way they have been claimed, they have been reclaimed, more exactly, by a group of 4 Chinese philosophers in 1950. I allude here to the famous Manifesto to the World on behalf of Chinese culture, which was published in Hong Kong in 1950. So those 4 Chinese philosophers, some of them becoming famous later on, have been the ones speaking of harmony, not only as a basic Chinese concept, but as a spiritual, and I would even say even they were not Christian, so somewhere close from Christian source, as a theological concept. Though maybe after this manifesto, after the 1950s, the concept of harmony and its spiritual and theological overtones have benefited from a new interest. What do they say? And it's interesting to read some part of this manifesto. There is a widespread notion that Chinese culture stresses the moral relationship between man and man, but not the religious relationship between man and God. This notion somehow is correct. From this, however, many argue that owing to this stress on morality, Chinese culture only knows a quest for the harmonization of actual relationship between men in order to maintain the social and political order. Simultaneously, they hold that there is no transcendent religious feeling in Chinese culture, that Chinese ethical thought consists of some rules for outward conduct without any spiritual foundation. This latter view is gravely mistaken. In other words, the stress on harmony developed by Chinese culture is from the start, spiritual and even transcendental. Harmony says something about both the inner world of man and the way man relates, I would say, not only to the cosmos, but to all transcendental reality. Once again, this assertion is made in a non-Christian context, but has been important later on for Asian Christian theologians. When investigating, those philosophers continue, when investigating Chinese cultural history, we must consider it as an expression of the spiritual life of the Chinese people. It is in spiritual expression that a notion like harmony takes its true meaning. But the core of the spiritual life for those philosophers, who are really the inheritors of the Chinese literati, lie in thought and philosophy. Of course, this has been debated later on. Some have said you are too much of a philosopher. Spiritual life of the Chinese people actually should be found in Chinese rituals, in Chinese popular expression, not in thought and philosophy. But let us say for the time being that there is always a relationship, a balance, a mutual enrichment between the Chinese intellectuals and the people from which it's come. Only if we start from Chinese source can we throw light on the spiritual life of Chinese cultural history. So in order to understand what we call spiritual life, we have to take the development of Chinese thought as a whole. Chinese spirituality is not separated from Chinese culture and thought, but it is also in daily life that Chinese culture manifests its spiritual form and content. There is a kind of circle that is to be drawn. Well, there is a concept developed in the manifesto of 1950 that will help us to go further on the road toward the understanding of harmony. It is the one of single rootedness, Ibn Xing. For its author, unlike Western culture, which has a variety of roots, for the Chinese mind, it is clear that the whole of Chinese culture comes from one single root. Actually, this idea of unity is not only historical, somehow it is historical, metaphysical. One could say that the one, the reflection on unity, the one, is at the root of Chinese spirituality. What does it mean that one is the root of all phenomenon? And that it is because this reflection of the one is first, that there is one single root of Chinese culture. Once again, this has been debated, but it's good to start with what I would call the mainstream of the reflection of harmony, and we will have occasions to criticize it. So the author of the manifesto explained the meaning and importance of the notion of human nature, Xing, in Chinese philosophy and in everyday life. Somehow it is in that place, the nature of the heart, that define the apprehension of the one, the special relationship between the human spirit and the one. If we understand the notion of heart and nature properly, we will see that there are a link between heaven and man. Nature is given by heaven, as it is said at the beginning of the Zhongyong. What heaven has conferred is called nature. Tianming Che Wei Xing. Okay? What heaven has conferred is called nature. It is in the realization of this primary gift of heaven that you find harmony between man and heaven and between men and such. Somehow metaphysics and politics are not separated. Well, this is not shared, that I said, by all Chinese philosophers. I would like here to quote a Chinese author of the same period who has become Christian, Lin Yutang, who speaks about the wisdom of Confucius. It is a very good book, but it starts from different premises than the one from the manifesto. He does see the concept of harmony as basic in Confucian and Chinese thought and culture, but he sees that concept much more as a kind of rational tool and political tool than as a spiritual one. Confucianists stood for rationalized social through the ethical approach based on personal cultivation. It aimed at political order by laying the basis for it in a moral order, and it sought political harmony by trying to achieve the moral harmony in man himself. Though moral in that case seems more important than spiritual, or more exactly, moral is over the spiritual, while the approach developed by the philosophers of the manifesto of 1950 see first the spiritual insights that developed in a moral and political construction. Anyhow, in all cases, harmony is seen as the basis for all kinds of relationship that exist among beings, living beings. What is interesting is that in Chinese thought, actually it's hard to separate between harmony and ritual. We know how important ritual is in Chinese thought. One could even say that the reflection on ritual has been as central for Chinese philosophers as the reflection on being has been for Greek philosophers. Rituals are the expression, but also the motor of harmony. Because we have ritual, we can express the harmony, which is the one existing in nature and society, in the cosmos and society, between heaven and man. But at the same time, if we do not perform rituals, harmony will wither, will have no energy. Men need to nurture harmony through rituals. Harmony is there first, but the special duty of men, and this is why ritual is so important, is to nurture both cosmic and social harmony. Lin Tang, who once more is more rationalist than other philosophers, expresses it this way. Ritual was aiming at an ideal social order. Confucius was trying to restore a social order based on love for one's kind and on respect for authority, of which the social rites of public worship should be the outward symbols. Of course, the rites of worship lead traced back to primitive religious rites and ceremony, and it is clear that this called religion of Li, of rituals, was actually semi-religious in character, being related to God at the one hand in the sacrifice to heaven by the emperor, and related to the common people at the other hand by the teaching of affection and respect for authority in the home life. I think that this notion of harmony as of rituals has been so important for Asian Christians, and especially Chinese Christians, that it has very much influenced their relationship to Christian liturgy. Somehow, Chinese Christians have seen liturgy as a continuation of the ancient Li. While in the West, we see often a kind of protest against what was seen in the past, the beauty, but sometimes maybe the futility of liturgy, or maybe the hypocrisy of liturgy. If you are very much involved in liturgy, but not in making the kingdom of God happen on this earth, we have not witnessed such a movement in Asia. Liturgy has always been seen by Asian and especially Chinese Christians as the space in which the relationship between man and God and man is being nurtured. So a special space for somehow confronting violence and fostering harmony and reconciliation. We will see the same stress on ritual and its insistence in contrast to Occidental atheism or the Western thought in general in the authors of the manifesto. Well, of course, what I said till now is too short, too quick, but it always raises questions that actually are very much relevant for our general topic. How to read Chinese classics today? Can we find in Chinese classics insights that help us to build up harmony and to confront violence in the world which is ours today in Asia? What kind of hermeneutical strategy may help one to make sense of the reading? And actually, what is our purpose? What do we look for when we are reading today the Analects and the Chuangzi? At the same time, one understands that one cannot read the classics in an anarchical way, that there are rules to be respected in order to be faithful to their inspiration. What conditions need to be respected in order to develop what may qualify as a reading which is respectful, meaningful, and fruitful. Well, once more, as we saw with the Bible, we cannot build reconciliation and peace building today without referring to the classics, the Chinese classics or the Bible, for instance, that are at the core of our tradition. We cannot erase the past in order to build the future. So let's go now into some Chinese classical texts in order to understand even better what the concept of harmony related to other concepts is about. So we start with a strange text in the third chapter of the Huainanzi at the very beginning of the Han Dynasty. In ancient time, the Emperor Shun fished on the banks of the river. After 1 year, the fishermen forced over the whirlpools, offering each other the deep places, the ones which are rich in fish. At that time, the mouth did not speak, the hand did not guide the gonfalon. Hidden virtue was kept at heart, and its transforming power galloped like spirit. Though the emperor is seen as someone who is not going to speak, but to be himself, to act by non-action, by wu wei, by inner virtue, in order to change a given environment. He goes to a place where fishermen are in conflict all the time, because everyone, of course, wants to have the best place for fishing. And he will be there for 1 year on the bank of the river without speaking. And just by his way of being, after 1 year, fishermen will offer fish one to another. Of course, it is a story, the equivalent, I would say, of a gospel parable, or maybe a myth, but it has meaning. It means that harmony doesn't occur through words, but through the way some people locate themselves in an environment and somehow are so porous to their environment, forget their self to such a degree that their very presence is transformative of the environment. Once more, it is an ideal, but we can think about leaders, about people in Asia, since maybe the wars of independence in Asia, whose presence has been somehow transformative of people, and find it is inside something that has to do with strategies to confront violence and foster reconciliation. Let's look at another text of exactly the same period, which means beginning of the Han Dynasty, but that takes the insights of earlier period. The Guanzi, or the Guanzi has a text which is called the Xin Shu, the art of the heart, which says the heart in the body is in the position of the ruler. 心是在体，君是位也. The heart is meant to control emotion, to make sure that emotions do not overwhelm the proper functioning of the body. So eyes, ears, senses, apertures, says the text, have to be half closed, half open, enough for receiving messages from outside, not too much, so as not to be attracted by the sensorial messages that are sent to us. Though the only thing that the heart has to do is to remain quiet and to control the senses. And if it does this, all things will function by themselves. So let's come back to the Emperor Shun at the slide before. he is able to keep quiet and to be porous to his environment, he is able to be really the sovereign, because his heart within him is already his own sovereign. He is not attached to anything. He is in connection with his environment through his senses, but not enough for desiring everything, for being troubled by everything. So he's both with the people he's living with, and he's completely present to himself in the quietness of one's own heart. And this is both inner and outer harmony. Let's go to another text, which will help us to see the connection between metaphysical and political concepts in ancient China. So this one is taken from the announcement of Tang, which is one of the earliest parts, if not the earliest part of the Shujing, of the Book of History. And it speaks of an emperor that after the conquest of Xia, is of the Shang dynasty, so it is the first Zhou emperor, tells people why and on which ground the emperor, the new empire will be based. Ah, you people of the myriad regions, listen clearly to what I, only one man, have to tell you. The august Lord on high, Shangdi in the Chinese text, has bestowed a moral character on the people below, Chong in the Chinese. That's quite a rare character today, actually. When one follows his constant nature, Renxing, one can be secure in one's way of life. What does this text say? Something very important. Every man, like the emperor, has a normal norm that is given directly by heaven. So every man has a sense of unity, of morality within it. And our nature is made to keep faithful to that moral character which is engraved into us by heaven. And if everyone follows this moral norm, though the empire will be peaceful. Though there are two ways of looking at such a character. We can say it's a kind of oppression, actually. It's just a way to say, be quiet, be obedient, and that's it. But on the other hand, we see that indeed Chinese ancient thought on harmony is humanistic in nature. Every man possesses a moral character. Maybe today we would say a consciousness. And this is exactly what Confucius, maybe 500 years after this text, will develop as an idea. He can teach everyone because everyone is possessed of the same moral character. So harmony is to be grounded on every man's moral character. And if this character is somehow denied, then real harmony cannot take place. So you see, like many ancient notions, harmony is ambiguous. We can see the stress on harmony as a tool for oppression, or we can see it as a kind of moral empowerment of everyone. So this will be developed by other texts, especially by the books of rights. And the Book of Rights will insist on the fact that you certainly have to serve the spiritual beings, the Guishen, but you also have to keep them at a distance so as to create a space for human interaction. Sometimes when a state is only focused on the worship of the spirits, there is no space for building a just society. But, says that text, the people of Job, of course it's a kind of ideal reconstruction, remain near to man and loyal to him. You give to the spirits what they are entitled to receive, but in the same way, you give to men what they are also entitled to receive. And somehow an harmonious society is a society that knows how to balance between the needs of the spirit and the needs of the human beings that together compose that society. This is another part of what has been called the humanistic outlook of ancient Chinese thought. Xunzi has been the one developing most this relationship between rituals and harmony. Well, Xunzi actually has an extremely rich view of rituals and insists on their emotional and sensorial aspect. Xunzi doesn't see society as a kind of ordering, military ordering, and that's it. He knows that one cries during rituals, that one rejoices, that one does music, that one does beautiful artifacts that are shown to everyone. He thinks that this aesthetic dimension of rituals as such is creative of harmony. Rituals manage emotions, they educate them. By education, they shape the inner virtues of the people, especially the sense of respect and attentiveness. But at the same time, indeed, for Xunzi, rituals are political tricks. They keep political order by nurturing beliefs and spirit and ghost, but they shape humanness. So Xunzi knows how to keep things in notions, in tension. Rituals are for real, they are full of extremely good things, but you can legitimately see them as political devices meant to keep order in society, even if the society is not really a just society. So Xunzi sees ritual as expressing moral virtue, manifesting social distinction, because harmony is not unity in the sense of confusion, but harmony for him, social harmony, is based on social distinction. But rituals are also means of redistribution, because the prince needs to offer things, and especially food, during rituals. Rituals are part of a gift economy. They also manifest order and harmony in the human world. They nourish human life, which is important. They are nourishing. They refine human life. They change human life and they nurture the vital breath through the celebration that take place. They lead one to the path, on the path to sagehood. And finally, the ruler, by observing the behavior of people during rituals, is able to choose the best ministers. Though rituals are really at the core of the construction of a harmonious and peaceful society. And for Xunzi, very clearly, when the ritual order is affected, violence starts to reign instead of social order. This kind of thought has been developed again in the 1990s, I would say in a much more rough and somehow primitive way, when there were attempts at developing what was called at that time culture of peace and cooperation. Okay, so they were saying that Heureux Wen Roi was a spiritual ideal and a social concept. The meaning was going beyond harmony. It was creating a kind of society of harmony and cooperation, or a kind of communitarian culture. It was a kind of holistic concept that was embodying epistemological, ecological, aesthetic dimension. Heureux, it was said, so harmony and cooperation was a prominent value of Chinese humanist culture, encompassing all schools. Its nucleus has to be enhanced and interpreted in order to tackle the new millennium and the various conflicts that are the ones we meet today. This was the same task as the one that was undertaken by the school of the principal during the Song and Ming dynasty. It was a wisdom of life. It was a way of recognizing conflict, but of dealing with it. It was seen, Heureux was seen as a natural fruit of the process of generation and regeneration, Shangsheng Bushi. In other words, the construction of harmony was the result of letting phenomena follow their natural order, like in the I Ching. But it was also, because of that, a very materialistic source. Somehow there was a kind of dialectical aspect of the Heureux Wen Roi. If you let phenomena develop according to their historical dimension, a harmonious society would inevitably follow. When you try to go against the order of history, harmony cannot be built. So I will say the Heureux Wen Roi construction, ideological construction, passed away after 10 or 15 years because it was too political or too ideological. He was trying to conciliate too many schools and tendencies at the same time. And when you want to embrace too much, at the end, you say more or less nothing. So there were questions really to be asked about all that. Are not present reinterpretation of what harmony means the historicized, so to speak. Do not present Chinese thinkers want to build a kind of all-encompassing version of harmony. Is not harmony something which is built, rebuilt all the time through different social situations? Is there only one kind of harmony, or does not harmony change in nature according to the stage of social development you have achieved? Second question, are generation change of growth, Shangsheng Bushi, which is, as we know, a basic tenet of Chinese thought, only a cyclical phenomenon? Or could they sketch a path towards a maturation of what peace and justice mean for humankind taken as a whole? What kind of historical dream or historical understanding do we have when we want to build a society based on harmony? Finally, I will come back to Asian theologies to make a kind of short conclusion. Today we have been centered not on Christian Asian philosophers, but on one source that is important for them, which is a Chinese source on harmony. Obviously, this concept is rich enough for providing Asian theology with a repertoire that is not only thematic, but hermeneutical. The way harmony is approached will reflect a way of reading classics that will reverberate upon the way the Bible is also read in the context of today's Asia. In other words, the most important task for Christian theologians is not only to assimilate what is Chinese harmony, but to interpret it, critically interpret it, as they also critically interpret the story of the people of Israel. And it will be to put the narrative on violence developed by the Bible and this narrative on harmony developed by Chinese classics into a kind of reflexive dialogue. Here we come back to a point I developed during the second lesson, which is that Asian theology wants to develop dialogically. Though our fourth and fifth lesson will be consecrated exactly to this question. What does it mean to do theology dialogically today, and how does such endeavor create a path towards reconciliation and peace building? So next time we will start to tackle this issue.